Hey, welcome to the Doc Analyzes Anything, the show where psychology and science meet. We analyze behavior, any behavior,
All behavior?
including, I just said any behavior, including, man, this one gave a story. This is a little different. Okay. Jordan was found mid-snack migration. I haven't read this. Jordan was found mid-snack migration in the kitchen, holding a spoon in one hand and maintaining the expression of someone who had just realized they were not, in fact, alone in the room. I don't know what exactly happened with my prompt there, but this is a this is a very generalized generative outcome here.
I could see it. There's like the whole oh, I'm embarrassed because I'm eating something at 2 a.m., like this bowl of ice cream or something I shouldn't be. Or maybe
Mhm.
it's an American Pie situation, like it's really embarrassing. Or
Well,
maybe it's like when Taylor has like her stash of cookie dough balls in the freezer that she doesn't know I'm sneaking little bits of here and there until 3 months later and they're just all gone. You know what I mean? Like,
but this gave the name of a person, Jordan, and called it a mid-snack migration, which I don't think is a term that anyone uses. Uh, and then also getting caught red-handed, not doing something inherently malicious. They're just holding a spoon in one hand.
no, but if you get caught like eating something, you're like, oh, now I feel embarrassed that someone saw me doing it. You have those like guilty pleasure. I'm gonna run. I'm just gonna grab this thing and then be out, and I'll do it 5 times throughout the day. But at least I don't have anybody sitting there watching me gorge myself on something. Like,
Hey, the intent of this whole thing was to emulate that of The Simpsons having different intros to every episode. And every now and then they have a very, very like nuanced or like, whoa, that really took a turn and went off the rails.
yeah,
So this might be our off the rails one.
yeah. I mean, there were times where there were full stories in those intros when usually it was just something else written on the board and Homer and them doing
Yeah.
something else like with the couch. So
Yeah, that took a turn.
yeah. But I can see it, but I don't know where your computer generated prompt was trying to
I
go here.
I made a rule that I'm gonna read the first one it gives me every time. So that's what I did.
Well, there you go.
Hi everyone.
Hey, how's it going? That's interesting. I'm your host, Dr. Steven Sparks, along with my co-host Kyle Sturry, Chad Hartung. How you guys doing? What's up? Oh, yeah, I forgot we're supposed to tell people that the topic is education, why we're missing the boat, our
There it
history,
goes.
what's going on here. So how you guys doing?
That's a fun that's how we're introducing the topic. I mean, it's fine. We can do it however you wanna do it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll throw it out there so people don't hang up just by hearing our personal conversation here at the beginning,
Okay.
and then it will be interesting because there is a lot of data on what works. There's a lot of history, human history. Most of human history is like not good when it comes to education. It's still not great depending on who you are and where you live. And
Hmm.
so there's a lot to unpack there, but I still feel like I should check in with you all and see, are you surviving in this day
Let's
and
check in with
age?
Chad. Let's check in with Chad first.
I'm surviving.
Chad's all
Good.
packed up, ready to move. He's got nothing left. He's in his empty room with just his chair and like a cardboard box with his computer on it or something.
No, almost. So we're still staged because we have an open house, but yeah, pretty much everything's in storage.
I surprised you're not just going with the like pictures online AI staging. Like it makes I put the furniture in the room for you, sort of thing.
You know, I will say the photographer added a fire in our fireplace. That was not.
Yeah, they do that.
I
They
thought that was
do
yeah.
that.
Those bastards.
I thought it was kind of cool because it is a working fireplace, but we didn't light one. But they had
Mm.
observation function.
Yeah. Make it
Yep.
a homey, nice homey, uh, comfortable living situation.
Yeah, like you can see yourself here in front of the fire. Doesn't
I
mean
can
that
see
the
myself
fire's-
having a fire here.
Yeah, I
I
control fire.
we've had like 9 years in this house. We've had like 2 fires.
Oh man, every winter we torch ours up.
I like the idea. I like it crackling. I like the smell. The issue is that room is not conducive to anything. Like it's the main for like thoroughfare to go out to the backyard or to the bathroom on the first floor.
Yeah.
And if you put furniture there, you're having to like navigate around it. So we just put in a giant climber for the boys to like make it like an
Oh,
indoor
yeah.
playground back there. Put a couch there in front of the fireplace, and like we don't even use it for anything else at this point.
Man, there's nothing better. Our fireplace crackling, it's wood stove, so the heat kinda emanates. We got a blower on it you can turn on nice and low, and the heat just wafts, and it'll be 80 degrees, 90 degrees in our living room. The rest of the house is freezing, but the living room is toasty. And then my girls will cuddle up on the take the couch cushions off, put it right up next to the fireplace, and cuddle up with blankets and just get, like, super cozy, and it's the best. Almost makes winter,
Bearable.
like you
Bearable.
don't wanna murder somebody.
Yeah, I always wanted to do a fireplace. We have like a big wood burner stove at the place up north, and I've always wanted to, but I've never gone and gotten the correct wood. And I know you can use any wood, but they say, "Oh no, you use the good hardwood; it'll burn cleaner. It doesn't create issues." And that alone is the only reason I've never had a fire, and that is because I am too lazy to go get good wood.
Oh, man, I got the moisture reader and everything. So
Yeah,
I yeah.
it's on there.
Huh?
I just don't know how to do any of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, it is hard work, and it's very messy.
yeah,
I thought I could make my boys do it, and then they're like, "I'm not gonna swing an axe, like, I'm gonna take my toe off." Like, "Alright, that makes sense."
yeah. We just have it for the fire pit. Let's throw it out
Yeah, yeah,
there.
yeah.
All right.
Me, I'm doing good.
You just wasted all of your time talking about fireplaces. You
Fires are
don't get
so
to tell us
cool.
you don't get to tell us at all how you're doing anymore. So there you
Fires are
go.
great.
Fire, fire, fire. There was a there was a one of the filters on Snapchat that like my 2-year-old, when he's not wanting to do anything and is just in a horrible mood, I'll just let him look at himself with the different filters on, not even taking pictures or anything. And there's
Was
one
it
that
making
just like
cornholio?
the whole room was like on fire, and like he turned
Oh.
like inverted the color, and he's going fire, fire, fire. I'm like, dude, that's too close. That's too close.
I
We do
thought
not
I'd
need a cornholio in this.
make
Well,
him cornholio.
does he now? Yeah.
All right, can we talk about the topic now, Kyle? Are you feeling like you've shared
I'm
enough?
curious how Kyle's doing.
Thanks for asking. I'm doing pretty good. Uh, suppose it all started. No, I'm doing fine. Thanks, Chad. I'm uh nothing. No, there's nothing going on. Nothing at all.
I You also didn't ask how I'm doing, so this was literally just how is Chad doing. That's all this was.
That was the point.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
like finding out how Chad's doing though.
my lower spine randomly hurts, and I need a backiotomy, but I'm great. So thanks, guys.
Oh man.
Good
I,
checking.
yeah, I have no idea what I did. Just try to stand up after sitting on the couch for like 30 minutes, and there it was. So,
There it is.
all right,
What's our topic today? What are we talking about today?
edumacation. Gotta get me one of
Oh.
them. uh, so I figured let's talk a little bit about the history of it, because I always like to start with the history of things, and also kind of what we think of the education system now. Even though everybody always complains about what's going on, it's still good to know how far we've come to kind of give a bright, fuller picture. You know what I mean? Like, um, so of course, just some quick research here. Earliest known education systems, like we're talking not just teaching your own kids or a local school like that's set up by a community member or something, but actual school system set up in like between 3000 and 2000 BC in Egypt and Mesopotamia. And so really only for the elites, to teach religious scholars, those in line for like government official jobs, and then for scribes so they could take down the history and share future information. So it was not widespread, but they did have these systems of education in our earliest basically grouping of societies, outside of the hunter gatherer, smaller groups. Um, Ancient Greece added some liberal arts and philosophy, but still mostly just for the elites. Like if you were in the main town center, and a lot of the education was, I think, people like Socrates out there spouting knowledge. He always claimed he was not a teacher because it was actually against the law for periods of time to be a teacher in that way, and heresy because he did not, when he did talk about things, it was not religion he was talking about. Um, but it sounds like they actually had, I don't know if it's a government institution, but at least a setup for formal education for those that came from their correct families, while everybody else just kind of lived in squalor and tried to survive. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
um,
So not equal opportunity back then.
it turns out there was, there's still not equal opportunity. Let's be honest. Like we're gonna touch on. We won't go too much into it because that's not really meant to be the purpose of this, but it is obvious that classism and racism has played a role all through human history when it comes to education, and still plays a major role in why some people have a much larger hill to climb than others, just based on the area they're living in as much as anything else. Um, but going back to the Islamic Golden Age, which I was actually not that familiar with, from the 8th century to the 13th century, they were really pushing educational institutions and really advancing mathematics and science and philosophy during this time. And so it's interesting to see, like, nowadays we think of a lot of those Islamic countries being um, almost to the point where they're pushing religious teachings more than anything else. At least that's kind of the view from the
Yeah.
Western world. And so it is cool to see that, you know, 1,000 years ago or a little bit more, they were very much in the center of science and math at that point. At that During that time, you know, Middle Ages, education in Europe was just churches and monasteries pushing theology. You know, the dukes and kings and princes like learned to read, but a lot of that was just to kind of push through the and make sure they knew how to read the Bible and learn uh, about the religion, as well as count the money they were collecting from the people who couldn't read and didn't understand what was going on necessarily.
That would be important.
Yeah. I mean, what else do you need to know math for us other than take people's money?
Steal people's money.
Yeah. And then 16th century Protestant Reformation popularized the idea that everybody should be able to read the Bible. So it really boosted literacy rates. But there's still, I mean, we went from 3000 BC to like now 1500s. And we've gone away from, like, other than individual centers of education, we've gone away from these large processes of teaching the masses, even though those masses back then were only the elite masses. So now you're finding small institutes here and there of education for the haves rather than larger systems. And somehow we went backwards during this time. And then during the 1800s, Prussia was the first to really introduce mass mandatory education, which then started uh, pushing other countries to do the same. And in the United States, Horace Mann advocated for universal taxpayer-funded public education in the U.S. mid 1800.
Horseman?
Horace,
Oh,
yes.
Horace Man. Okay.
We should just go with Horseman.
Well,
Like,
I thought that's what you said.
what is it? Is that the
I just want to
Minotaur?
clarify. Oh, yes. Yes.
Yes, that it was
Okay.
this Minotaur came up and said, "Hey, you know what? We should be paying for education here in the United States."
And what year was that in?
Mid 19th century, so mid 1800s.
Okay.
But nobody listened.
Okay.
So here in the United States, there was really not a single school. There was just, you know, random people. I think it was often women in the community. Oftentimes they were widows. They would set up and teach reading and writing and things just, like, kind of surrounding religion to help people so they could read the Bible, that sort of thing. But there was no actual school. The first one that was free, open to all students, and recorded was established in 1635 in Boston. And it was all based around teaching the Bible and other religious teachings, as well as Latin and Greek classics. Which I understand there's always been the push for the classics, but I find it interesting that all right, we're going to teach you our religion that you have to accept and agree with, but also here's what these crazy people used to think about their gods and, the chariots through the sky and things like that. It's interesting to think of that way.
That is interesting. Like, this isn't true, but this one is true.
Yeah. And we that'll be another discussion another time, but
No, we're gonna talk about it now.
I'm just saying the flying spaghetti monster, if you came in with no background in religion whatsoever, makes just as much sense as anything else. And they have a beer volcano. All I'm saying.
You're really converting me.
I may have mentioned this before, but the 8 I rather you didn't seem to make a lot more sense in the 10 Commandments. Like
Uh,
I rather you didn't act like a sanctimonious asshole while out there like talking about your beliefs is one of them.
fair.
Yeah.
It's fair.
So 1600s beyond this first school, there's some apprenticeships. That was most of the education. And interestingly enough, families were required to give their children an education, and they could be fined if they didn't. That they need to learn they need to know Christianity and the laws of the colony. So that was it. You could get if you got an apprenticeship, you were probably set up to at least do well in your town after you're done with the apprenticeship, and you have to know the laws in the Bible, and that was it. But by the end of the 1600s, schools were starting to open up across all the colonies, much like in the model of this first school in Boston. Can't remember what it was called, but it doesn't matter. We're not going there tomorrow or anything. So, if I needed to find a Google Maps, I'd be in trouble. But so 1700s growth continued.
I struggle even like fathoming 1600s.
I know.
Oh yeah.
Like what did everything? I was watching Game of Thrones. I'm like, there's candles everywhere. They didn't have electricity. They barely had wheels. When did this actually take place? And I just don't understand the difference between like 700 and 1700. It's just all the same to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because that like we talked about with when we were at the brewery, like how far we've come in such a little period of time, like hundreds of thousands of years of human history, and then all of a sudden we accelerated.
It's just a blip across all of it, but huge acceleration.
Yeah.
All this time in education history, and like just the last not even 100 years or around 100 years, we've flown forward in what's available to people. Maybe not, we may not have hammered home what is a good education necessarily. I know we're always trying to improve those things, but just the fact that you really weren't taught until at least 1800s, and even then a lot of people weren't taught. Now you said, what would life have been like in the 1600s? I would have been burned as a witch immediately. And so that's what life would have been like for me in the 1600s.
I would have been burned or sold.
I mean, as soon as I started spouting any of the things I talk about on a regular basis, they would have said witch and
I mean, you did say some crazy stuff before you got an education.
That's true. Much of it was horrible, and I'm surprised I'm allowed to even exist in this society, but that's why education is a good thing. So there you go.
I would have been fine.
Yeah, well,
that's
that's
would have
because
worn my beard, and
you are only 2 generations away from living in the 1600s. It's very different for you.
That's a fair assumption.
So, yeah, I think life may have been more fulfilling because every little joy would have been much more joyous because there was so much less access to reinforcement in your daily life. Like you did whatever you had to do to survive. You went home, you could like read by candlelight or do activities until it got dark out, and then it's like, I guess I'm gonna sleep now.
Yeah.
See you tomorrow.
It sounds like Steve's an advocate for the movie The Village. I don't know if you saw
that. Somebody ruined that movie for me before I saw it.
No.
That's like the whole point of the movie.
Does the bad guy die?
You never seen The Village?
I don't know. I might have.
I don't know. I mean, it's too late now. It's too late. If you haven't seen it at this point. But it just came out. This girl in high school was like, it's crazy that they're all actually living today. And it's like, I haven't seen it yet. Like, that's the twist. It made that scene. You remember when she's like traveling and she like the car goes by and all of a sudden you're like, why is there a car? And everyone's like stunned. It just ruined it. So much less impactful.
Yeah, I think generally there's a good chance we're heading back that way if we don't watch what we're doing as a society. So maybe we'll experience it, or our kids or grandkids will. So we'll see.
We are, yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a whole thing.
So where was I at? 1700s now?
Yeah, we just finished up 1600s and apprenticeships.
Yeah, so the schools continue to grow throughout the 1700s, kind of the same way though, where it's like not formalized in any way, no restrictions, or nothing is required. Then the land ordinance of 1785 allotted land in each western township for the establishment of a public school. And then 2 years later, the Northwest Ordinance provided that this is a quote, since religion, morality, and knowledge were prerequisite to good government, schools should be encouraged. So up to this point, we're not even encouraging education, but
This is
that
the
kind of goes
1700s.
the late 1700s. Yeah. And I mean, let's be honest, the president literally said, I'm winning the uneducated vote, and has seemingly tried to tear down systems of education. And so maybe it's not as encouraged as we like to think it is nowadays, but at least it's required still at this point. So,
Still technically.
yes. 1852, Massachusetts enacted the first education legislation that said children 8 through 14 must attend school for a minimum of 3 months out of the year. And three of those months, 6 weeks were required to be consecutive.
Okay.
So
Is this where like summer break starts to come into play?
I'm sure much of this had to do with agriculture. You needed the kids to help with your farm. So you have to get an education, but also we're not taking them out of the home, so you're going to starve as well.
Because summer break is like a relic of those times, right? Like that's the only reason why it still exists.
In theory,
Or
that is, I think it maintains partially because kids, I don't know if need a break is the right word, but there's almost you need a beginning and end to the school year, the way that's set up right now. I think people would really struggle if it just was like an all year round thing. Like, all right, when does my next grade start? When do I move into the next step? Like part of the issue,
right.
but it was originally, I do believe, because of the planting and harvesting seasons needed those children to be able to help out in the fields.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting. Like if we made a shift, like maybe one of two things: either all work switches to a summer break, or all school goes full year round. Because then there would be, I'm not saying do this by any means, it's not a prescription, but then they'd be aligned, right? What you're learning environment wise, school would then translate directly over to what the real world is. Because right now, the real world, I don't get summers off, but I did in school, right?
I will say part of the issue transitioning from school, and college included, to the real world is in school, there's always an end point. I just have to work until this date. That final project's due, the final grades are in, the final tests are coming, and then I can take a breath and my tasks are done. And in the real world, the tasks are never done. There's just more piled on, and maybe you finish one, but there's 3 more to go to. And so there never is that deep breath. I've made it through onto the next thing. And so I wonder if it somewhat sets us up for failure at the same time too. But a lot of schools have moved to a trimester type setting as well, where like you have breaks between each of the semesters or trimesters, but it goes all year round, and you just have a few weeks off in between each one. And then assumingly the fall is when you start the next grade or what have you. And so I think there is some push to get across this, or beyond it. And maybe it would be better to space out that break, because I remember half the summer you're like, oh, this is cool. I'm out. I don't have to do anything, no responsibility, at least until you're in, high school later on, and either needed a job or some sort of side hustle to get some spending cash or whatever. But by the end of summer, it's like, all right, I'm ready to go back and see people again. You know what I mean? Like that. I may have dreaded actually having to go back and do the work, but I was always ready to go back and be part of like that community kind of thing, even
Yeah.
though I still will admit that I just went to school because that's where the girls were. So, uh, you know,
Steven.
hey, I made it through. So the exceptions to that first law, though, were that children who were deemed mentally or physically unable to attend were not required to go. And so you would be fined if your kids didn't go to school unless you said, hey, they can't because either at that time we just assumed that people with special needs were not going to be able to learn the way we needed them to, or that physically it's not easy for you to get in the building, so we're not gonna bother trying to get you there, sort of thing.
Do you think there was any thought where the powers that be, if you will, thought this particular person is not going to contribute to society the same way, so we don't need to? Or do you think it was definitely about like incapable or inconvenient to?
I will say, and if anybody wants to look this up, do you remember how was it Minnesota government that had that website from the paper we had written but haven't gotten published
Oh
yet?
yeah.
It gives a
Yeah.
timeline of special needs, mental health in our country, and we should just do an episode just on that timeline because
Mm,
up until 16, 17, I think it's up until the 1800s, it was like you were kind of just left to fend for yourself. You weren't expected to survive. You weren't expected to thrive. You weren't expected to play any part whatsoever. And people who were, not a fit for society, whether it's because they were criminals or had some sort of delay or were just poor and thought to be a drain society, were just either locked up, sometimes taken to the woods and just left there. I mean,
yeah.
the history of human care and rights, it starts very recently, and it's not been great even that recently in a lot of areas. But we were talking like you were just imprisoned if you weren't contributing member of society up until like 150-ish years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so if we should look that up, maybe put in the show notes. But like if you check out this website, just it's a quick walkthrough of this timeline, and it is ugly the way people have been treated.
I reckon when you
Hundreds of
got, I mean, I reckon when you got systems like the education system that were built for elites and those that were being groomed for decision making, it doesn't
Yeah.
really like propagate through society that we should care about everyone, not just this particular class or group of folks.
Well, there's also like the religious aspect of it too. Just the societal view of like, if you were born with something that looked different than what was typical, then that would be a curse of some sort, like be it from God or the gods or whatever. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and even much more recent, early 1900s, I took as a history minor, mostly African American history and then World War II history classes. And we did one class where we just learned by going through census data and
Mm,
then like how people were treated in society based on that data. That was like just how did you get classified? And obviously, racism was horribly rampant during that time. But if you were mixed race, it was 10 times worse. If it was. And so, just small differences like that, where there shouldn't be a difference between how you are treated, whether like how much of what race you are, any of those things played a huge, huge role. And if you could pass yourself off as white or black during those times, you were much better off than if you were just
mm.
too much in the middle and it was obvious that you couldn't go one way or the other. So, I mean, this is very recent when we're talking about it. We'll talk about it in a second. Like the desegregation of schools was like a year or two before my mom was born. Like that's not long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking at some of these dates. I'm like, nearly remember this part of history. Like this, this is pretty recent.
Yeah, my mom was 31 when I was born, so 33 years before I was born ish. That was when the desegregation of schools occurred. That does not seem all right.
Yeah. Yeah. That
uh
is wild.
and to still push home the fact that sure we're now getting schools available to most kids, at least most white children in most areas of the country. uh you go back Harvard opened, I think it was 1636. And so that was like a university that was made available to the wealthy, the elite class, when you're still almost 200 years away from there being regular schooling for everybody else. And so this was not a trend that just started in the old world and then didn't follow here. There were opportunities. It just was rare, until not very long ago. So yeah, 1852 is when Massachusetts did the first law. Other states followed suit. By 1885, 16 states had passed attendance legislation. But it would not be until 1918 that all states would have educational requirements as part of their state law.
1819?
No, 1918.
1918. Got it.
Did I say it backwards, or did you?
1852, that's when the 3 month and then 6 weeks consecutive during that 3 months.
Okay.
And 1855, that's when 16 states
1885.
1885. That's when 16 states passed. And then it wasn't until, what was the last one?
1918 that all states finally had a law requiring school for children.
Yeah. So now like 30, 35 years.
Yeah. There were, again, back in those times, especially in northern states, instances of integrated schools, but segregation was normal. And prior to the Civil War, at least in southern states, enslaved people, it was against the law for them to be taught. And so it was like candlelight, middle of the night, sneaking around just to learn to read, because their enslavers would assume, okay, you may be able to get away and find ways to escape or plan together better if you can communicate that way. And maybe for other reasons, it may have just been spite and hate as well. Interesting enough, part of those classes I was taking in college, there's a place called Covert, Michigan, that was extremely integrated very early, like 1800s. Saw one of the first Black judges in the United States. And this small pocket, this small community, although there was still obvious a lot of racism, and it was definitely not equality the way we would want there to be equality. True integration to all parts of society happened extremely early, but then the neighboring town was not going to be supporting it. So it was just this one community that decided this isn't right. We're going to let everybody do what they should be able to do, which was interesting.
That is interesting.
I wish I could remember the name of the book, because we read a book as part of that class. I'm sure it's here amongst all my books that would take me 2 hours to figure out which one it is, but it was very cool to read that pocket that just happened to occur there, where kids were going to school together and just ignoring what the social norms of the time were.
And that's like right after the Civil War too, right?
It was around that time. I don't remember the years exactly.
Civil War ended in 1865, and then this was I'm just reading, in the 1860s.
Okay. Yeah.
Is all it says. That's wild.
Yeah, it has been 19-ish years since I took that class, and so I'm not remembering all the details, but yeah,
you gotta brush up.
I know. It's hard to talk about things when you don't know what you're talking about, So you need that education there again. Yeah, following the Civil War, there was a fight for the right for education, and they set the freedmen's schools. So the idea of the separate but equal, that obviously was not anywhere near equal. Conditions were difficult. There's lack of proper materials, crowded schoolrooms, and I mean, kids didn't have food. They didn't have the correct clothing. They were hoping to get the education that their white counterparts were getting during that time. Then we get to the Brown versus the Board of Education, 1954, where the Supreme Court overturned the Plessy versus Ferguson decision, which they gave the separate but equal distinction, and said, by law, by definition, separate means it's unequal. And so that's when you see the videos of the children being bused to different areas and rocks and bottles being thrown at them as they walk into the schoolhouse.
By
And
grown-ass adults, too.
it is fucking
That's the
ridiculous to
wild part to
think
me.
that
Because
was
okay,
happening.
I mean, it's not that wild. It's like, it's not surprising, but it should be. But looking at those videos and seeing, like, 10-year-old kids getting rocks thrown at them by 50-year-old ladies is, like, the most mind-boggling, like, it's not funny. I'm just, like, watching it, you're just like, "What is happening? What was that?"
And the ability to handle that and take it, not either break down or, like, lash out
Yeah.
violently, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think
Yeah.
by the time I was 11 or 12, I was at 5th grade, I was taller than my teacher, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
if an adult threw something at me in middle school, I might have at least attempted to kick their ass. I'm not sure, but I might have. It's but
And that was, like, my it wasn't my grandma, but, like, that would have been my grandma's age, you know what I mean? Like, she would have been in her like, she would have been in her 20s or 30s during that time. I don't know, it's wild. It
instead
wasn't that
she
long
was
ago is what I mean.
instead she was living by candlelight and gas lamps, but it could have
Oh,
been
no, no,
her.
no, 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 she was not Amish at that time. She was living it up, baby.
I will say my comment there about me being able to lash out really though is another point that in the future when we talk about some of these issues more clearly shows, and I mentioned a couple episodes too, that white privilege where I'm like, oh, I would just kick their ass. I wouldn't put up with that. Like
Sure.
you have to learn at a young age when you are living in that scenario that if you do
Yeah.
that, nothing good can come of it. And that's not fair
Right.
either, that you can't stand up for yourself in those situations. So
Right. Right.
1958, Congress passed the first comprehensive federal legislation regarding education. After the desegregation of schools, then they finally said, "All right, we should try to get everybody here, make sure they're learning good stuff." It was mostly in reaction to the Cold War. You know, they wanted to make sure that we were able to keep up and fight against the Soviets. We're talking sometime around the time of like the Sputnik and this race to space, and we need to keep up with the technologies of others so we don't fall behind and then end up getting beaten by them. It seems to be where this came from for the
Mm.
most part. Um, and they also did additional funding and loans for colleges, improved mathematics and scientific instruction in elementary and secondary schools, just really trying to. I mean, before that, you could teach whatever you wanted, as long as you were at school, they weren't even looking at what you were talking about.
Man.
Uh, from there, more acts. There's reform. I think is we always hear about reform all the time. It doesn't actually mean anything. People just say, "Hey, I like that reform. We should get some of that." Uh, it's an older movie now, but if you haven't seen Brother Where Art Thou with George Clooney, where it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
the Odyssey, but what 1930s, 40s time period,
Right.
and everybody's just like talking about reform. It's how little that means, but how much people think it means is always pretty ridiculous. And
Right, right,
the
right.
fact that they always think it's progress, even though it may be nothing whatsoever. And um, so we'll get into some of those different types of education reform and what they've tried to do with that in a minute. But uh, it's got to be better than not having any structure of what people need to learn. But it's fallen quite short, and there's plenty of data to show that our government and everyone else is either unaware of or just keeps ignoring. So, uh, then we get 1975, the passage of the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, and so now finally, what is that, 50-ish years ago, we said all people, regardless of any disability, you know, they require a fair education. So
And Linda McMahon, if you're listening, take some notes because you didn't know what idea was.
Is that your person in Indiana?
Linda McMahon?
Yeah.
No, no, she's the Secretary of Education.
Oh, I don't pay attention to what's the
You
details of
you
what's
know her?
going on.
She's the Vince McMahon WWE.
I was gonna
Oh,
say that's
are
what
you
I was thinking.
serious?
Yeah,
I had no idea.
man.
I
Oh,
I stopped paying attention to who was put in these cabinet positions back when like DeVos was in there, who like has large
DeVos
stakes.
also famously didn't know what idea was, but
Okay,
yeah.
well, DeVos is known in Michigan because of the DeVos family,
Yeah.
is a billionaire family, but also has stake and really pushed like the charter for-profit schools, trying to get rid of public school just for profit, which makes a whole lot of sense when you have the same funding, except now somebody has to make a profit. That's
I
logical.
Indiana's lieutenant governor is on Facebook telling everyone to take state voucher money and go to private schools because our public schools are the devil, and like, you're in a position of leadership saying that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
So
same thing when they're trying to privatize the community mental health system in Michigan. I'm like, okay, you're taking the same money, you're not adding more money in here, and now someone has to make a
yeah,
profit.
yeah.
So that's just money out of the hands of the people who need it. Sure, that'll save the system money. That makes sense. So here we go. 1980 was when Congress officially established the U.S. Department of Education as a cabinet agency. I have no idea why. I assumed that had been around a lot longer, but
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it won't be around much longer.
no, because who needs an education? Again, I know it sounds conspiracy theory-ish, but if you can convince people that education is wrong, it's a lot easier to control them when they don't know how to think critically about things. You know what I mean? If we can just feed them some random conspiracy to go down a rabbit hole of, so they don't actually see what's right in front of them, it takes a lot of the pressure off you. So, then 2001, No Child Left Behind Act, which was interesting because instead of working with people on learning how to really teach, they're just going to do standardized testing and then defund, fine, or punish generally underperforming schools rather than helping them improve.
And No Child Left Behind was really wild for me. I ran track at a very conservative private school in college for my first couple years of college before leaving that institution. But there, President Bush came and spoke at that university outside of Notre Dame, and there were education majors at this university protesting Bush. And I remember thinking like, "Whoa, like, this is, like, the most conservative campus in Indiana, and these guys are protesting a Republican president." It was really weird, and, because
Yeah,
of No Child Left Behind, not because of anything else, but No Child Left Behind
right.
specifically.
Yeah, I will say I didn't know how to learn all through school. It seemed like every other like 6 months, every other year, I don't know, they came up with some new teaching tool. There's a new strategy. We're gonna use this workbook. It's gonna teach you how to learn.
Mhm.
Instead of just sitting you down and teaching you how to memorize things, how to take notes, doing these things. It's just like the onus is on you to learn this, but we're gonna spend all this money on this program that's gonna help you learn those things on your own.
Yeah.
Um, and it wasn't until college I actually learned how to learn. I just was good enough at remembering just enough to do what I needed to do to pass most of the classes, not all of them, but most of them, and then skate through basically. And it was just BSing your way through it because I never learned how to learn at all. And then on top of it, like, so they wanted to study me in elementary school because of mental math. They'd put a problem in front of me. I'd do it in my head. They're like, well, show your work. I'm like, I don't know how to show my work. I just did it in my head. And they
Forgot
wanted to
about
like
mental math.
study how I did this. And I'm like, I can't tell you. I'm not gonna be of any help whatsoever because I'm just doing it in my head. And middle school I was in advanced math classes until I got mono. The whole football team got mono, or several of us did. It was someone was putting their mouth on those water bottles, like a
I was
gross
going to say
person or
that's
something.
suspicious.
Yeah. Uh, and then I either had to make up all that work from being sick or just drop back to the normal class. And then by high school, I was taking accounting classes just so I didn't have to take regular math classes because You like miss one day, or I had one teacher that would sit around and tell fishing stories in the middle of his lecture, and you days off because nobody's interested in this fishing story. Snap back out of it, and you've missed enough that now you can't figure out what the hell he's talking about at all. And it happened so much that I just failed the class and took it over in summer school because I could not figure out what's going on, and I could not pay attention to his BS. So
when you ask
How was
most
it fit?
people to like reminisce about, we'll just say high school and like their favorite teacher or their favorite class, I think most of the time you'll find somebody, the ones that they remember that had an impact were ones that were like driving and supporting curiosity, not function. The ones that gave you like the room, the boundaries, but the room to explore as opposed to just, we need a functioning society, so learn this and then we're going to test you.
Now, I may agree with that, and if you make it interesting and do it in the way that you're teaching, telling a story, it's easier to pay attention. And a lot of this comes down to first knowing what are the skills to be able to learn how to remember things, just other than throwing the information there and hoping that you remember. And the other part is motivation. Like we're just talking about it. You didn't get to go to school until 100 years ago necessarily, unless you were in the elite class. And so it was special. It meant something. You did not waste that opportunity for education. And then by the time we're going to school, it's like, this is something I have to do. I don't want to be here. I'd rather be out hanging out, playing with my friends, doing whatever. And so this Ottawana sticks around. Like you really wanted to learn. I wanted to learn because I didn't have this opportunity. So you should want to work extra hard and learn this too, rather than realizing that you have those high performing students that aren't smarter naturally. They just have that built in motivation. Like my wife, Taylor, who was like math and science center going and getting stressing out if she didn't get 100% on something. And then you have people like me are like, I'm sure I'll pass well enough and graduate, I guess. And then the people that really needed the extra help, they were floundering and failing, would get it. But us in the middle, we're just kind of ignored. You know what I mean? We had, okay, we're gonna set up this competition and it's supposed to motivate you to do well. But I always knew my group was gonna suck. And so as soon like day one, day two, we're falling behind. I'm like, why are we even trying this anymore? I'm not getting the pizza party. You know what I mean?
Of course, with that
Uh
Right?
no, you
you could
you
have
knew
rallied. You
within
could have rallied the troops, Steve.
No, you knew within I knew those kids. I knew who I was grouped with, and I knew within 2 days that they didn't care either. And so, like, we have in our field some of the good behavior game where you pick different things. We'll have multiple skills we're working on. It's randomly selected, and you set it up in a way that everybody is working towards a common goal and that you're always working towards that goal. Like you set it up so you will not fail unless people really, really do not even try to participate whatsoever. And therefore there isn't a competition me versus them, but we're all working together and we're always working and making it towards and that level of motivation, just that slight change where it's not like, oh, I have no chance to win now, I'm gonna give up, is enough to do what I'm talking about here. We don't have to like pay kids to go to school. We just need to find ways to be creative with giving that extra motivation that probably the middle 50% of us or more don't have naturally.
Yeah.
Um, Also getting back to what you were talking about, Chad, in teacher college, I spent some time working with because there's a lot of overlap between our field and the teacher education departments in the universities. And it is very much always been and still is talked about and considered to be an art form to be able to teach children well. How can I make this interesting, make this different, change up the way I'm doing things to keep them interested? And it is like a good teacher is creative. And
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with making it interesting and changing it up. And like you said, that you can get some more interaction there, but you're still not necessarily teaching people how to learn or teaching in a way that they learn automatically versus what direct instruction, which is a offshoot of behavior analysis that we'll talk about here. They have determined a way to teach kids so efficiently that some of these academies will guarantee 1 to 2 grade levels in summer. While the kids are out of school, you're falling behind. We'll get you ahead of everybody just by coming in, during the day, and we're going to go through and do this in a systematic way, and actually teach you the information rather than like spouting at you and hope you can regurgitate it later on a test.
Yeah, you're also probably like a 2 or 3 to 1 instead of like a 30 to 1. So it's like much more
It can be
personalized.
it can be done as a full classroom type setup. But it is the techniques that they use to, and people have probably seen some videos. The cliche one is like everybody's getting up and kind of saying the same thing in unison and helping remember. It's kind of like we talked about in the memory episode, where it's that repeated exposure is how you remember things, not just hearing it once and it's, kind of saved in your memory bank like a computer, so to speak. Um, but direct instruction wasn't even the first behavior analytic approach, and so this is where it starts getting frustrating to me as a member society, not even just as a behavior analyst, but the project follow through started, I believe, in 1967. It went on for 30 years. We have all these things, kind of like what's the one nowadays, or the most recent one that everybody was having to do? Kyle, how are your kids learning nowadays? What's it called?
I don't know. State
Common
testing,
Core. The Common
Common
Core
Core.
that they
Oh
were
yeah.
pushing with everybody, that everybody's like, "No, I don't know how to teach my own kid or help them with their homework." These programs throughout history, someone comes up with a program, they get a lobbyist, they donate campaign money, their person's elected, and they push this new program in. And sure, you have data to show, hey, this handful of kids were like learned really well using this program, but they're not really testing it versus other things. And this has been going on forever. But starting in 1967, the government decided they are going to test all these different things. So direct instruction, parent education, the traditional behavior analytic technique, where it's like reinforcement and punishment based on repeating, and like we'd see um, in an autism center, but it was being tested for your average student as well. Uh, Bank Street, whatever that is, responsive education, TEEM, cognitive curriculum, open education. These are just, I'm reading a graph that just from the year 1967 to the 1977 are the ones that they tested. And out of all of these, behavior analysis, the scientific kind of people would say robotic technique almost worked very well. But direct instruction blew it out as well as everything else out of the water. I mean, it's not even close to how effective this was. And that is the technique that is being used in some of these academies, in order to get students to learn that much more in just a few days. And this was being implemented in a school system, kind of a more traditional classroom, and it was working. So we have 30 years of data from this project, or around 30 years, and they ended it in the 90s and did absolutely nothing with it whatsoever.
Yeah. It was
And
costly
then,
too. The costly project.
yeah, it costs a lot of money, but also all these other things like Common Core, where someone probably has some data to suggest it, but also, you're putting in a lot of money into campaigns and lobbyists to push your product because you're going to make more money. Those cost a lot of money too,
Mm.
and are chosen because either they're flashy or because of pressure on the politicians. So I was not sure whether I should mention this book or not, because the tone of it turns people off. It's a very angry book. It's called War Against the Schools: Academic Child Abuse, by Siegfried Engelmann. And he talks about, and this was 1995, I think. So it's been around for a while. It was actually, he was interviewed in 2020 as well, but talks about how they have this data, but here's what's really going on in government. Here's where the money is. Here's how like the players play the game, and why what works is never selected in. And so partially because of the politics game that the direct instruction folks haven't always played. I should also say, in our field, there's the big DI and little DI. And what that means is there's the companies that create the materials and sell the programming for direct instruction. And then there's the people who study and use direct instruction. And it's the people that study it and use it the way it's supposed to be made, not these large corporations that are trying to monetize it, that we advocate for usually.
Mm.
Um, but they have not taken that approach. And so, not I don't know if I'm gonna suggest people read the book, but if you're interested in seeing where this came from, how the work went into it, what the findings are, it might be something you want to look into a little bit further.
He's also got a Teach Your Child to Read book, which a lot lighter and did teach my kids how to read really well, actually. We used
Yeah,
it here.
yeah, I have another one. It's like Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy
That
Lessons.
that's what it was.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
We have not done it yet, mostly because our 4-year-old's like, I don't want to learn to sit down and learn to read right now. So
Uh,
you
willingness is half the battle.
yes, yeah. But generally, it is frustrating to me that there is this information out there. This is a government program that
Mhm.
determined this information. These are generally somewhat unbiased universities that are also publishing the information, although now it looks like it was either Oregon or Washington that I used to get most of this information from, and I can't find it on their page anymore. So they may have finally taken it down after 30 years of nobody doing anything with that information.
Yeah.
But it's there. We know how to do. You can still find ways to be creative within the curriculum to an extent, although that's another hurdle we have to overcome is the idea that teaching is an art form and not a science. But our whole science is human behavior, which is learning and verbal behavior. And so there should be a lot of overlap, even though these people found a way to even improve it better than the scientists did in the first place.
Yeah.
Um, and it is frustrating to me that our kids could be learning that much more, that much faster if we just took this approach more broadly.
Yeah. I will say I'll push back against you a little bit on the creative teachers, like having had really good creative teachers and like really, really robotic, borderline, like just terribly boring teachers for my kids. Like I see the difference. And I know that you're not saying like creativity is bad or whatever. They've they're creative in that they're doing something novel that's getting the kids' attention and something sticking with them. So, yeah, it's not necessarily a science because how do you, you know, make how do you define those topographically and functionally what exactly they're doing? But I feel like anymore half the battle finding a teacher who's just not disillusioned with the system and fried is
Yeah.
like 90% of your battle because it's such a war zone out there.
Yeah. I'm not arguing that at all. If you had have a good teacher who is good at keeping kids' attention, that's going to improve things wildly.
Yeah.
But if you also taught them these techniques that have been scientifically proven to teach children better, imagine how good that could be. You know what I mean? We're talking about two separate things, even though I think
No,
when you go into an
yep, I
education,
agree.
you go to the education center and they think you're saying, nope, you have to change everything that you're doing, that you're not doing things right. And we're saying, no, that this educational approach to actually delivering the instruction is better. But what you're doing, if you're a good teacher, is great too. And so don't stop doing that either, you know?
Yeah. 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 Yeah, my son has a teacher right now who is I mean, he's a space cadet. He loses focus pretty easily. But she's like, she'll look around at the class and be like, "Let's go outside and do this." And just like on a whim, they're just out in the soccer field and they're just all laying in the soccer field reading their book there. But he's like, I actually paid attention because I was just like so bored in the classroom. And it's cool to see because then we've had the other side of things where
Yeah.
it's like, hey, you're allowed to like give people a high five every now and then or like, do something a little bit off the book.
It's a completely same situation in grad school. Once we had a grad student had to take over for a professor who couldn't make it to class one day, and he took us to the bar for Oberon Day, and that was
Yep.
exactly the same situation
Same
as
thing.
your kid. Yeah,
Same thing.
I learned very well that day. So, uh, I think we need to circle back around to the whole racism component as well too, because we talk about the busing and act like, okay, we fixed the system now because we've integrated the schools, yet the money put into the schools depends on how affluent the area is, and that's
Mhm.
another major issue. And sure, you'll always have the elites who choose the private institutions, and you can't tell them they can't do that necessarily. But something as simple as taking all of the money for the education system in your state and delivering it equally to the schools rather than saying, hey, these taxpayers have more money, so like their kids get a better education, would make a huge impact.
And
And
now with the voucher movement that DeVos kind of started, that is in effect in a lot of states, you can take state money and go to a private school and pay tuition with that state money that would have otherwise gone to
right,
the local public school.
which almost has to cost significantly more because again they have to make a profit. Like I don't know that, but it seemingly
Even if
it
it
would.
doesn't, it's basically a scholarship for people who, so like if you want to go to a private school, it still might cost you 10 grand, but you get 6 grand off because voucher covers some of, you know what I mean? So you
I
like you'll
used
still have to
Yeah.
pay.
Are they still allowed to be very choosy on who they let into those programs as well? Because I'm sure there's an underlying classism, racism to that as well.
I'm sure that there are laws that would apply to those
Yeah.
institutions for sure. They couldn't blatantly state that, but yeah, I mean, you have to apply. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, Chad and I grew up in a very affluent area that was not that affluent when we were small children. Like it went from a small area to middle school. They're building, neighborhood after neighborhood with like 2,500 to 3,500 square foot houses, maybe 4,000 square feet to high school. There's mansions just north of town. And those kids are like, hey,
Mhm.
you guys live down in the ghetto. I don't go down there. Like, okay, the whole area is very affluent now. It wasn't when my
Yeah.
parents bought the house, but sure. Um, and I was shocked to find out how many of my friends who didn't live in those areas, their parents would rent an apartment just so they could live there and not, so the kids go to the better school. And that's
Uh,
not available to everybody. And it was
right.
just because of that tax money available. And like, it should not be allowed that just because your parents have more money, that your public provided school has more money too. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
school millage system, it's important to have that money like influx into the system, but it still needs to be a way where it's divided evenly so we don't continue this system of it's like academic segregation, but pretending like it's not. And then on top
I
of it,
agree.
trying to close down the whole, Department of Education in general. And it reminded me of like, all right, you have ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, like Greece, China had decent education program. It said India back, we're talking 2000, 3000 BC, and then all of a sudden it goes away for the most part. It seems very similar, like that's almost a push now. Like we don't need this education. Although the people that are saying, "Hey, we don't need this education system," are still sending their kids to private schools and private colleges and
Right.
spending a lot of money on
Right.
that education that nobody needs anymore. And it gets a little worrisome of where we could be going with it if people don't realize that this might be. I'm not going to say it is, but it almost blatantly is for control of the people in certain aspects.
You might be having some people that are a little bit tired of waiting for a system to not be a Frankenstein system that has not been resolved, but just new stuff added to it. And so they opt for, I'm just going to make sure my kids have the opportunity.
You're just saying because you got sent to military school because you were a pain in the ass that you shouldn't count in this discussion, is what you're saying here.
I mean,
Come
kind
on,
of.
Chad.
Yeah, they didn't know how to handle me. That was
Yeah.
something different.
And he was the good one of our friend group too.
Yeah, I was the responsible one. I'm just the one that my parents can
Uh,
handle.
yeah, but in general, no, you're right. And like we will always, as long as there is an educational system, choose the public education system because we want our kids to interact with people from all walks of life and not just live in
Mhm.
this bubble and not see what's going on elsewhere. But we're also ready to supplement education if it tends to not be good because of that. And that's not something everybody can do, even if they have the financial means. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so it is. We need more. Is it parity the right word in this system? We need it to be truly equal, not just, hey, we've made these approaches. And I also know that it's a hot button topic, but it should be with higher education too. Hey, we should have free higher education for people in this country, but it doesn't need to be college. It could be going to a technical school or on the job training and apprenticeship, that sort of thing, where I mean, we see the shrinking middle class, and I know we'll have an episode on money and the financial system as a whole in the future, but we import way more than we export. The people are the ones buying the products that keep the elites in money and in power, yet they're maximizing profits and taking the money out of those hands and then trying to say you don't need an education, yet you can't make enough money without an education to buy those products. The whole system is going to collapse if we don't allow there to be a system where everybody, or at least most people, can survive and thrive. It's illogical to maximize profits today to then not make any money tomorrow. And so if you can't get an education, fill these positions, have enough electricians, enough heating and cooling technicians, enough engineers, all walks of life, then the whole system's going to collapse at some point. So it just doesn't, none of it makes any sense.
Steve for town council.
Yeah, that's what they want.
That's what they want.
The biggest problem with me for any of these positions you joke around with, like government, is I am going to think I know what's right. And so you're supposed to be out there voting for your constituents, whether or not they want what you think is right. And I would struggle with that.
Tough but fair. Right?
Or just, I
Tough.
think I know everything better than everybody. So there you go. Again, the only true knowledge is to know you know nothing. And so because I realize my knowledge is eventually incomplete and can probably be disproven at some point in the future when better ideas come around, that's what makes me able to claim that I have any intelligence whatsoever. So there you go.
That's a good note to end on, I think.
That is way too positive to end on. Any other thoughts or questions before we go down the dark hole at all?
No.
I just really find the whole...
I had a thought, but it's going to be entirely too long, and I do have a meeting coming up, so I will have to table this.
I think just looking back at the timeline is shocking. How recent all this is. Maybe that's the silver lining, is we're not even, 40, we're not even 50 years into the Board of Education. And there wasn't even a mandate for like federally for the education till like 75 years ago, I think I said, or something like that. I mean,
yeah,
maybe that means that we can still move forward and make better progress, but the way the rhetoric goes around nowadays, it's easy to feel like things may not go well as well. So,
right.
So on that note, let's push for education. Let's look at the people that are learning and what's available. There are good paying jobs if you do the right training, the right college, or whatever that education may be. Enjoy the weather as it's warmer. Enjoy the sunny days, not the stormy days, and just be careful out there. Make sure you're fighting the good fight, because you never know when one day you walk outside and your local farmer's watering the crops with Gatorade because you think electrolytes are what plants crave, and all of a sudden there's no food and we're going downhill from there. So just be careful out there.
I knew the reference was coming.
Idiocracy fits what we see in society so closely nowadays. It is scary. So go watch that movie. It's almost historically relevant at this point.